Hi, I'm Chad with Move Forward Guitar. This lesson is from a short series I'm doing on how to memorize all the notes on your fretboard. In the first lesson, I showed you octave shapes to memorize. In the second lesson, I showed you how to use those octave shapes to find one note up and down the whole fretboard. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to use the octave shapes with the open strings and how to find all the open string notes up and down the whole fretboard. So if you've been following these lessons in order, you already know the octave shapes, but I'll do a really quick review right now just to refresh your memory. So the octave shapes we used were the one that started on the 6th string, we had this. The one that started on the 5th string was the same one. One that started on the 4th string was this one. One that started on the 3rd string was the same as the last one. Then the one that started on the 2nd string was this. And then the one that started on the 1st string was just the same, in the same fret going down to the 6th string. So those are the octave shapes that we used that I showed you in the first lesson. And then in the second lesson I showed you how to take those octave shapes and find the F notes up and down the whole fretboard. So in this lesson what we're going to do is start with the open strings, and I'm going to show you how these octave shapes work with the open strings. So if you're taking these lessons, like I mentioned before, you should already know what your open strings are. That's something you should learn really early on when you're learning guitar, because that's how you get your guitar in tune, and it's just really important for everything you do later on guitar. But just a quick refresher, your open strings are, starting with the 6th string, you have E, 5th string's A, 4th is D, 3rd is G, 2nd is B, 1st is E again. And from low E, the 6th string, to the high E on the 1st string, that's 2 octaves apart. So you have E, and then 2 octave higher, another E. And a little trick you can use to help you remember the E, A, D, G, B, E is elephants and dogs grow bigger eventually. So elephants and dogs grow bigger eventually. But like I said, you should already know your open strings. That's just a refresher in case you need it, or for some reason have gotten this far without learning them. But that's really important for everything you do on guitar, and really important before you start trying to learn all the notes up and down your fretboard. So we're going to take these open strings, like I said, and I'll show you how the octave shapes work with them. So the octave shape starting on the 6th string was this one, you already know. If we were to start with the low E on the 6th string, just open 6th string, the octave shape would be this. So this is an E on the low string on the 6th string, and this is an E on the 4th string, 2nd fret. 1 octave apart. And that's the exact same shape as what we did up here when I was showing you with G notes or with the F notes. Here it is with F notes. That first octave shape I showed you, it's just now instead of fretting the 6th string, that string is open, so we're not having to fret the 6th string anymore, it's just an open string. But technically that shape is the same, it's just the open string is doing the work of our fretting finger. And if you want to visualize it a little differently, if you look at the 12th fret, you have that same octave shape if I was going from the 12th fret 6th string and then to the 4th string 14th fret. That's an octave shape, that's an E, this is an E. It's the exact same thing as what we did here except 1 octave higher, because everything in the 12th fret is the exact same as the open strings, just 1 octave higher. So low E, open string, that's an E 1 octave higher, A open string, that's an A 1 octave higher, and so on. So you can see here, if I was actually doing it an octave higher with the 12th fret and the 14th fret, if you visualize this down near the headstock, these would all be the open strings, so I wouldn't have to push that note down. So then that just applies for every single shape. So the next shape is going to be the exact same thing. And it doesn't matter what finger I was just using my 3rd finger to fret the note just so you can kind of visualize the shape. But typically you wouldn't necessarily do that, but if I was to do it with the next string set, I'd have open A, and then I'd have this octave shape, which is the exact same as the last one. Just like when we were doing it in the 3rd fret, it's the same shape, it's just down here and the open string is replacing that fretted note. Then the next one, we have the open D string, and then this right here, again, that's just that open string just replacing that finger fretting that note, but that'd be the same as this shape that we did up here in the 3rd fret. And then the next string is the open G string, and we have that shape, and again the exact same thing, and that's the same shape as the last one. Now we're on the next string, which is the B string, which is the 2nd string. We would go back to this one, which would be when we did in the 3rd fret was this shape. But now we're with the open B string in there. And then we're to the 1st string. That's the exact same as before where we went when we were in the 3rd fret. It's just in the same fret. But now we're doing it with open strings, and you already know that this is an E on the 1st string, this is an E on the 6th string, just 2 octaves apart. So those are all the octave shapes using the open strings now, and that's how you visualize them. Just visualize them like you're fretting that open string note. The shapes stay the exact same. It's just going to seem a little different because you're not actually fretting the lower note or whatever note you're starting with. You're not actually fretting down here. So now you can do the exact same thing that we did with the F note and find all these open string notes up and down the whole fretboard. So with the F note, we started with the F that's closest to the headstock on the highest string that we could reach, which was in the 1st fret, which is why we started with F. And we went through and found all those F notes. That's what we did in the last lesson. So go back and review that if you need to. Now we can do it with all these open strings. So we can start with E. The E that we would start with would be on the 1st string. We would just go E on the 1st string, E on the 6th string, and then we would have the exact same thing. We start with the open string octave shapes that I showed you. And so on, all the way up. Then you can do it with the B string, exact same thing. Since we're starting the B's on the 2nd string, we would have this shape that I showed you. That's where we start, then we just go all the way up. And same thing. The next string is the G string, that's the 3rd string, so the octave shape we would use was this one that I showed you, so we would just start with that. Same thing all the way up. Next string is the D string, so we're starting with this octave shape, and then same thing, so all the way up and back down. Then the last one we have, because the 6th string is the same as the E, the 1st string, so the last one we have is the 5th string, which is this octave shape, and then you just start going through all the way up, all the way back down. So that's how you would start with the open strings using those octave shapes. You would just start with an open string, hit the open string, use the octave shape I showed you, and then just go through in order like I showed you in the last lesson. And like I said, if you need a refresher on that, go back to the last lesson. But it's the exact same thing that we did with the F note.